Okay, friends, what a pleasure, really. What a sheer pleasure to be here today with you in this wonderful, beautiful, gorgeous city of Brighton. And I think for a change, the weather was absolutely in the direction of Palestine today. I know the Brighton and the Hove chapter of the PSC has been among the most ardent and loyal friends and supporters of Palestine over the decades. I owe you, my friends, on behalf of the Palestinian people, a most deeply felt thank you. Thank you for your efforts in keeping this issue, our issue, alive in the public sphere. Thank you for your support in spreading awareness of the great injustice that has been visited upon the Palestinian people. And thank you for being so steadfast and determined, for having a weekly stall in the middle, in the heart of Brighton, at which you engage the public. It is remarkable, my friends, and truly heartwarming for me and for all of us, the Palestinians, to see the extent and level of your love, of your solidarity, of your support. It is precisely through such solidarity that we, like others before us, will overcome and see peace reached and justice served, even in Palestine. Allow me also, please, to thank the organizers of today's splendid program. Notably, of course, our friend Barry, but I know there is such a team behind today's events. I was told about few. Remind me.
Agnes.
Agnes. Give her a hand. Give her a hand. Give her a hand. Agnes, you are such a human being. I remember meeting you many years ago, and thank you, Agnes. But also the musicians, artists, chefs that have dedicated their time and efforts today. And may I add, our Palestinian community, who are part and parcel of you here, who have made today a Palestinian event in every sense. And of course, thanks for showing this wonderful movie by Farah Nabulsi. I think it's one of the best films that very accurately captures the daily humiliations Palestinians have to suffer under Israel's occupation. It does so without any sensationalism or even great violence. And while there is great violence in Israel's occupation, it is the minor daily violence. It is the minor daily violence that the daily humiliations, the daily burden the occupation lays on you that really wears you out. Week to week, month to month, year to year. 74 years, my friends. It has been 74 years for us, the Palestinian people. 74 years of oppression, of violence, of dispossession, of being forced into exile. And among you, you will have many Palestinians from Jerusalem, from Tulkarem, from Nablus, from Gaza. I met all of them. Can you please make your way inside? You will find some seats here. There are a few seats inside. There are people at the door outside. And still, 74 years, my friends, and still the world's governments sit on their hands. They and they wonder how to bring the two sides together. They wonder, like so many Miss Worlds, why we can't just all live together. And none ever have the courage to name the disease None have the courage of these world governments to name the illness, the disease, the virus. Israel's colonization, ethnic cleansing, apartheid, the unequal application of international law, the unequal application of the international human rights law, and the absence of simple decency. And even now, my friends, even now, as global consensus is growing that Israel and Israeli war crimes must no longer be and go unpunished, still these officials fail to screw up their courage. Compare and contrast to Ukraine, where the Western world's laser-like focus has been on boycotts, sanctions, and divestment. Remarkable, considering how we have been told over the years, the decades, and repeatedly by those same powers, same governments, same officials, that boycotts do not work. The translation, of course, is this: boycotts and sanctions only work when they want them to work. And it is clear that the Western governments have no interest in holding Israel to account for its many egregious and decades-old transgressions of international law. It is bluntly clear. So, my friends, I believe these countries, like King Connaught, are trying to turn back the tide. You know King Canute, the famous story of King Canute trying to turn back the tide. I believe there is no longer any argument here that Israel's outrageous behavior and policies against international law are well and widely documented and understood. I suggest that the reason we are seeing Israel and its friends increasingly deploy the charge of anti-Semitism is because they know the argument is lost and they want to divert attention. I believe that those who think international law can only be a plaything deployed in the interests of the powerful are underestimating the power of argument and the intensity of the human desire, your desire for justice. I believe the tide is turning. I believe the tide is turning. Why now, you may ask? Now, when political parties around the world, and including in the United Kingdom, seem to have doubled down on their support for Israel, despite the global consensus among the world's human rights organizations, human rights community, worldwide consensus that Israel is an apartheid state, that Israel is guilty of committing the crime against humanity of apartheid. It started with the Palestinian human rights, moved to the Israeli human rights organizations, Beit Salim, then it moved to the US-based Human Rights Watch, then it arrived to London only in February in a damning report, very well documented, argued, researched by Amnesty International. There are, my friends, I believe, a number of reasons, including the above-mentioned consensus among human rights organizations and activists. Perhaps most importantly, though, there is no sham peace process to hide behind. There is no sham peace process to hide behind. I am explaining why do we believe that the tide is turning. This, by the way, is a result of Israel's absolute refusal to entertain the basic premise behind that peace process, that we no longer have one, such as the creation of a sovereign, independent state of Palestine on the boundaries of 1967. Israel led the world by its nose since the Oslo Accords. Israel led the world by its nose since the Oslo Accord. It never intended for any Palestinian state to emerge, let alone on the 1967 boundaries. It built settlements. It continued expelling people from their homes. Remember Sheikh Jarrah and Silwan? You are watching what is happening in Masafir Yatta to the south of Hebron as we speak. You have followed the decision by the High Court, the Supreme Court in Israel, to allow the army to ethnically cleanse people from their villages, 12 villages. It built walls. It isolated and blockaded Gaza, my beloved Gaza, my hometown, while all the time exploiting the natural and human resources of the West Bank and expanding its illegal rule in the occupied East Jerusalem. You've seen what happened on the 29th of May in Jerusalem. And you've seen the power of our people. You've seen the dignity of our people. You've seen the stubbornness of our people. You've seen the greatness of our people in Jerusalem particularly. Please give them a hand. This was never a good faith negotiations, and as a result, there will be no going back to any similar process, such smoke screens. All the process did was set aside our rights, Palestinian rights, for some undefined future point. That's all what it did. It was a freezer. No more. Promise you, no more. No more negotiation while putting our rights on hold. We are being treated like second-class people. And to that, we also say no more. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken gave a speech at the United Nations in March this year, in which he talked about how the universal in the Universal Human Rights Declaration means all people have the same rights. That's what he said. Universal means all people have the same rights. In the very same speech, he attacked the UN Human Rights Council for its quote-unquote focus on Israel, without mentioning how many international resolutions Israel is actually and continually is breaking, is in breach of. More than 700 UN General Assembly resolutions. And the number is not much less when it comes to the Security Council resolution. The only conclusion here, my friends, the only conclusion we can draw is that Mr. Blinken, the US Secretary of State, does not include the Palestinian people in this definition of universal. When he says all people have the same rights, he either does not consider us, the people of Palestine, as people and have same rights, or he considers us as an exception to the rule and somehow beneath contempt to be treated equally. We are used to this, unfortunately. Alas, friends, we are used to this. Remember, it's been 74 years. But we have never accepted it, and we never will. Enough of this nonsense. That's the message that came out of Jerusalem a few days ago. That's the message that came during the funeral and the burial of Shireen Abu Akleh, and I was there in Jerusalem. That's the message that keeps coming from Jenin and Nablus and Khalil and Gaza. Enough of this nonsense. Enough of being denied our right to self-determination and statehood. Enough of being denied our right of return, and I see many Palestinian refugees among you today. The right of return is sacred, sacred in our own private right and collective right and in international law. Enough of being denied our right to travel, to trade, and to thrive, unhindered by the arbitrary oppression of a belligerent military occupation, foreign military occupation. Enough of being denied our rights for those Palestinians among us who have Israeli citizens, and I see some of them here. Enough of denying them to marry whom they love. Enough of denying them to build their homes on their land. Enough denying them to expand their own towns, to exercise their collective and national rights. And I'm talking about our brothers and sisters in 48 areas. Because so much focus is on the occupied territories, but they are also facing the same suffering, oppression, collective punishment, colonization. It is simple racism. All this is simple racism. All those who support Israel's apartheid, they too are equally guilty. There is no other way to put it anymore. I can't find any other way. I tried, by the way. I was thinking, how do we put it? How do I put this sentence? We have reached a stage where you are either with the Palestinian rights or you are an apartheid apologist. Remember all those apartheid apologists from South Africa's past? Remember them? I don't remember them. And good riddance. They're gone. So my friends, the struggle against apartheid South Africa is instructive. Then too, largely Western governments covered for and protected a racist regime long after its bigotry had been exposed and was apparent to everyone. Then too, my friends, freedom fighters and rights activists were, like you, were dismissed as terrorists, arrested, murdered, beaten, and exiled. Then too, the United Kingdom and the United States were the most endurably and enduringly loyal to the supremacist state. It took popular mobilization. It took people getting out in the streets. It took artists and athletes to object. It took intellectuals to protect and protest. It took a lot of efforts over a long time. But that effort and all these efforts all served justice, equality, and it did hold those who were hostile to international law to accounts. It signaled them out. It named and shamed. That's the power of the people. Apartheid South Africa fell. Apartheid Israel will fall. For the same reasons, my friends. The very same reasons. Nothing unites people, us, more than our collective feel of abhorrence to injustice. That's the human spirit. That's how we are all created. Be it Palestinian, British, French, American, Chinese, name it. We are created to abhor injustice, let alone when the injustice is so blatantly clear. It is for this reason that we subconsciously, all of us as a human race, always root for the underdog. It is for this reason that human history, halting and brutal it is, has nevertheless been progressing, because we learned our lessons as people. I know sometimes it's hard to believe. After all, we are also standing in front of humanity's greatest challenge ever in our history, which is the climate change. But we as human beings are better off. We are most and more educated, healthier, live longer, and materially more wealthy. We are more united and we are more peaceful than ever before. Remember that. And there are reasons why we are healthier and we are wealthier, because of our collective conscience and our collective institutions and rules and laws we have built together. It is especially hard to believe as a Palestinian after 3/4 of a century that argument that we are progressing, but we are. And this should give us comfort, yes, though it must not make us complacent. The world tends to a better place, certainly in the long term, for all of us. We must hope it does not quickly before climate change wreaks too much havoc upon all of us. And we must hope that the Palestinian people will soon benefit from this progress and will not allow, because of very specific considerations, that one state wreaks havoc of all that progress. I fear that if Israel continues to get away with shooting journalists, 3 in the past 3 weeks, 3 in the past 3 weeks, and they even attacked the funeral of the last journalist, young 31 years old, Ghufran. You know, when I see this, when I see that an occupation force only has one option to use, which is violence, not only against the living, but even against the dead, I know the near is end. The end is near. I'm sorry. The end is near. If Israel continues to get away with killing and arresting our children, more than a dozen already since the beginning of this year, while is detaining more than 170 children. If Israel continues to get away with its policies of collective punishment, the Israeli military has demolished 6 houses only the last few months, the beginning of this year, as punishment for the families of those who they alleged to have committed attacks. So it's not the person who committed the attack according to their allegations, it's his father and mother and siblings have to pay the price and go into, yesterday in Ya'bad, go into their towns, their cities, invade it, kill bystanders and destroy their home. If Israel continues to get away with the settlement building, and as far back as last month, just last month, Israel announced a further expansion of these war crimes. By the way, building settlements is a very well-defined act in the international law, the 4th Geneva Convention. It's a war crime. They've announced the building of, yet again, another 4,000 units. If, in other words, Israel continues to get away with, excuse me here, flicking its middle finger at international law, I'm sorry, I have to repeat this, flicking its middle finger at international law, the damage will not only be to us, the Palestinian people. It will be to the global rules-based order, an order that has done much to make us global, to make our globe, our world, a safer and a better place, and has succeeded in staving off the kind of madness and mass slaughter of the World War II and the World War I before it. Nobody wants that to happen. After all, what would the legitimacy be then of international sanctions over Ukraine? We needed international legitimacy. And there will be many more Ukraines, my friend. There will be many more Ukraines if we don't protect that global order. I do not believe that this is a future many would want to contemplate. We shouldn't. Especially because we don't have to. We simply don't have to. As we, and all of we, the Palestinian people are asking for is to apply the law equally. That is it. Apply the law equally. You cannot be selective in your application of law. Can you imagine a policeman here will selectively choose who's... Do they? You can say many things about the UK, but the rule of law here is what marks this country. And I have lived here when I was a child, and when I was a student, almost a child, a young man. And really, the rule of law is crucial. It's crucial. It's paramount. And that rule of law extends to the international arena. It's not just about one territory, one boundary. And can you really deny us these rights without being, and let's not mince words here, can you deny us these rights, whoever you are? Anti-Palestinian racism? What else? What else? How do you justify this selectivity? At some point, politicians, officials, diplomats around the world will find that their arguments for maintaining the status quo and protecting Israel, shielding Israel, will wear down. So thin, it will wear down so thin as to be mere parody. They will be a joke. They already are a joke. You know that. Because you have seen and you have been at the sharp end of things, you yourselves. And some of you have participated in the anti-apartheid movement of South Africa. Very few of you, I know all of you are young now, you're looking at each other. And when the day comes, my friends, when the day comes and the Palestinian people are free, and I use the term carefully, when, it's a matter of when, not if. When the day comes and the Palestinian people are free, know that you will have played your part. All of you have played your part. You are on the right side of history, my friends. And that side is growing in number and in strength every single day in the United Kingdom, in Europe, in the United States, everywhere. And it's thanks to you and thanks to the countless others like you who are mobilizing, educating all over the world. It's mass mobilization we are seeing. And thanks to you not only today, but thanks to you over the years and the decades. I know you've been doing this for a long, long time. It's paying off. And I promise you one thing, my friends. We will not be silenced. And we will not be removed from our homes in Palestine. They did it once in 1948. They shall never do it again. We will die in our homes. We prefer to be killed in our homes. And we will not be persuaded to waste our time again. Enough of wasting time. 25 years of smoke screens. From the bottom of my heart, my friend, and on behalf of the Palestinian leadership and people, I thank you. And together we will overcome. Thank you very much.